Hi folks, it's Van C, #1 Razorback fan. Probably haven't seen me in any videos in a while, but I've been kind of busy. But today, I've got something that's kind of interesting, if I do say so myself. I got this here CB Gitty Hub Cap Howler. I kind of saw it on sale and it had these cool graphics on it. And I said, hey, it's on sale, so why don't I go ahead and get it? Now, I did add a few modifications here. As you can see right here, I put some twin Piezos in it so you can amplify it. So I thought that'd be pretty cool to do. I made a short video showing you how I built this baby and also some of the complications that I encountered while making my modifications. So go ahead and watch the video that follows, and then at the end I'll demonstrate how this baby sounds. So keep watching now, you hear? This is a special edition of a CB Gitty Hub Cap Howler. Here's what the kit looks like unboxed. This is what the parts look like when they're all laid out. The braces were glued to the box bottom. The two inner end pieces were glued into place. The frame is then clamped overnight for the glue to set. The clamp was then removed. The back panel was glued and then screwed into place with 2 screws. The front panel was glued and then secured with 2 screws. The neck brace was inserted, but it took quite a bit of sanding and filing to get it to fit. 6 holes were drilled in the neck brace brackets using 1/16 inch drill bit. 3 1/2 inch Phillips head screws were placed on each side to secure the neck brace. The sides were glued into place. And now I'm going to use a ribbon clamp to clamp this overnight to let it dry. And here it is with the ribbon clamp. Now it's time to remove the clamp. Time to glue the neck to the body. The neck was then clamped into place. Braces were glued to the soundboard. Now it's time to remove the clamps. This is a wiring harness from MGB, so I'm testing it to see if it works. I'm going to see about installing it. Create a hole using a drill and a Dremel so that I can drop the components of the wiring harness through it. Drill and a Dremel were used to make a hole for the output jack. The neck at this point was sanded. I put painter tape on the fretboard. Now it's time to start treating with some True Oil finish. 4 coats of True Oil finish were applied to the body and the neck. I drilled a small hole for the ground wire to come through. Now it's time to install the wiring harness in the pickup. The pickup was screwed into place. The output jack was secured into place. Electronics were tested with a screwdriver before gluing the top on. The top was glued and then clamped into place. Now it's time to remove the clamps. There we go. The tail piece was secured with 3 1-inch screws. Strap buttons were installed. Pilot holes were drilled out for the tuners using a 1/16 inch drill bit. The tuner bushings were tapped in using a brass hammer. Tuning machines were installed, and I had to replace 6 of the screws because they're so soft that the heads sheared out, and so I had to get some from my spare parts and substitute them. Now it's time to install the box corners. The box corners were all screwed into place. Time to add the volume and tone knob. I did end up having to replace one of the tuners because of the defective screws, but also it rattled and it was loose, so I got a replacement tuner for it. Now it's time to string the guitar. The guitar was strung with some electric guitar strings. The strings that came with the kit are for an acoustic, which will not work with a pickup, so I had to use some electric guitar strings in place of the strings that came with the kit. Some notches were cut in the bridge, and now it's just a matter of tuning it up and setting up the intonation and the string height. I strung it up, and then I realized there's a problem. If you look closely, see the distance with the string and the pickup? A little too close. In fact, if you push down here, string directly touches the pickup. So it looks like I may have to remove the pickup and the electronics and try installing a piezo. So that's going to be interesting. The electronics have been removed. Now I'm going to go about installing some Piezos. I installed a small piece of wood to cover the hole where the pickup had gone into. This is a piezo wiring harness. I'm going to try installing this and see how this works. Of course, test it. Make sure it works first. I've installed the tone pot and the volume pot, and also the output jack. I hot glued the Piezos in. Now test out the Piezos. This is what the finished guitar looks like. This is the front view. This is the back view of the guitar. I went ahead and tuned her up. Now let me demonstrate how it sounds, but I will point out a couple little details about this before I play it. These tuners are horrible. In fact, I had to replace one of them because it was so bad. So this thing is difficult to stay in tune, and with this bridge, almost impossible to intonate. So I'll tell you up front, the sound is not the best. But let's go ahead and let me demonstrate how this sounds unplugged without any amplification. So you can kind of see that what a resonator sound is, okay? Here it goes. I also will tell you, this is a GB tuning, kind of a standard tuning for 4-string cigar box. And it allows you to do 1-finger chords. So let's go ahead and do some 1-finger chords and kind of give you an idea how this sounds. So here we go. Not too loud now, is it? In fact, that banjo player probably drowns you out, okay? So what we're going to do is I've got this thing hooked up to CB Gitty amplifier right here, and also a CB Gitty preamp that I built. Now these two knobs right here, they're both volume knobs. Now you might think, in fact I think in the video I said it was a tone knob, but it's actually a volume knob because I got two separate Piezos. Got one right here, got one right here. So let's go ahead and crank it up and see how it sounds. So here we go. Seems to work pretty good with the amplifier. Now you could probably use a bigger amplifier and get a louder sound, but even so, it sounds kind of rough. But anyway, big question is, can you play a song with this thing? Well, yes you can. Let me go ahead and play this song called Media. All right, here we go. So overall, this kit was an interesting experiment in using a piezo for amplification purposes. Thought the graphics on the kit were pretty cool, but the tuners were horrible. In fact, they used cheap screws, and I actually had to replace all the screws on the tuners plus one tuner. I also discovered that trying to put a flat single coil pickup was probably a bad idea. It did not work, so I don't recommend you do it. Would I buy this kit again? Absolutely not. Because like I said, the cheap tuners, like 7mm tuners, and I couldn't replace it with, I'd like to use like 10mm tuners, but holes weren't big enough. And also this bridge right here leaves much to be desired. You cannot get this sucker intonated no matter how much you try. So would I buy this kit again? No, I would not. So hopefully you learned something from this here video. So why don't you just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video if that Marlin guy lets me do another one, okay?